it's heightened for me at the moment. So their energy is heightened for me at the moment, and I'm kind of in full flow. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Get started.
Yeah, we better. As you can see there in the top left-hand corner of your screens, it says Neil is now recording. So that's just so you know we're recording. So you've got to be careful what you say now. Right. Everyone ready?
Ready.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll count us down from 10. And then I'll do the introduction. I'll say hi to Andy first. How you doing, Andy? What you been up to? And Andy C, that is. Andy C, because he's the co-host. And then we'll move around and introduce everybody. And then we'll just throw it open, basically. Whoever wants to feel brave enough to come in first. Maybe Ben Emlyn-Jones, as you've had the coronavirus. So you were told. We can talk to you first as on that one. Okay, here we go then. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Hello, you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. But if you happen to be watching YouTube, you're also seeing us on YouTube as well. So this is the second in a coronavirus special where we're talking with a few extra guests. Some of the faces you might remember from our previous show, which is Andy Thomas and Stephen Sakellarios. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen. Thanks again for joining us. And we're also joined by Ben Emlyn-Jones in Oxford and Carol Noonan in Portsmouth in UK. And regular co-host, of course, is Andy Chaplin in Hertfordshire. Andy, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, Neil. Ticking on by. At least the weather's nice.
It's a shame that we got to stay in this nice weather. Yeah.
You see, if we didn't have the lockdown, then it would, of course, be peeing down with rain. So because we've got the lockdown, it has to be bright sunshine.
Well, one of the things I was thinking of actually is if this coronavirus actually occurred in the winter with all the storms and things like that, people wouldn't be so worried about a lockdown because they wouldn't really be going out anywhere. True. So you really feel the full force of a lockdown once the nice weather comes and you have Easter and the bank holidays where people traditionally want to go out and about and celebrate with everybody. And instead, everyone's watching DVDs or at home reading books or producing shows like us.
Or channeling.
Or channeling. That's right. Channeling, Carol says, yeah, because we'll come to you in a minute, Carol, with your special talents in a second. But if I can come to Ben Emlyn-Jones first in Oxford. Now, Ben, you were one of the first people I personally knew that actually believes they came down with the coronavirus. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, sure. I believe I have actually had the COVID-19 disease. I can't prove it because I've never been virally screened like nearly everybody who's actually diagnosed with it. But when I got back from my trip to Hull, that is to the Research and Witness Convention, I became very ill. Now, and when I say very ill, I mean by my standards, because generally I've been lucky with my health throughout my life. But I came down with an illness which is the worst I've had since I had glandular fever when I was a child. It was like flu. The symptoms are similar to flu. The dizziness, fever, a feeling of tiredness and sort of dissociation, rather drunk type feeling, aching limbs, and also the coughing, very bad coughing, a loss of taste and smell. That's another feature of it. And but it was much worse. It was more severe, and I was really pretty much immobile for about 5 days. I didn't eat anything either. I had no appetite. So I drank plenty. They advised you to drink plenty, so I did. And now, I'm the first person actually I know that actually has come down with this illness. Other people have since then. Several people I know of have died, including 2 porters at my hospital where I used to be a porter have died. I know that it does, although generally for most people it's something you can actually get over. For a minority of people, it's a serious disease. I'm concerned about what's going on with coronavirus. It's not the disease itself, which appears its origins are shrouded in mystery, and there's a lot of controversy about where it came from and whether it's has some kind of purpose, whether it's been done deliberately. I've been looking into things like this. I've also been looking into the political angle of it, the fact that the government seems to be very keen to impose their own will on us as a result of this, with the pretext of protecting us from this disease. Of course, we do need to protect ourselves from this disease, but I don't believe that should be used as an excuse simply for the purpose of the government stretching their authoritarian muscles, which seems to be the purpose now, what David Icke calls problem, reaction, solution. So that's kind of my position at the moment.
Now, you had to diagnose over the phone rather than getting a test. Is that correct?
Yep. Now, very, very few people have actually been tested. To be tested for a particular virus, you need to have a viral screening, which has to be done. There are several ways of doing it. But like most people, what I've done is I called a helpline, and the person on the other end of the helpline, after just a 3-minute conversation, said that I probably had coronavirus. So I was advised me to self-isolate, to socially distance, and to immediately to basically stay indoors, take it easy. And
sounds a very thorough check.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few people have viral testing kits. I think are around the place. I'm sure Boris got one of those. But
I heard actually. I was told that you can buy viral testing kits from Harley Street in London, which is obviously the private clinics road for those that don't know, and they about £400 each or something.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's someone flogging them from Thailand for £1,500. You know, I mean, it's like the toilet paper. You know, I've seen toilet paper on eBay for like £100.
I think there's more chance of testing yourself successfully. A pregnancy testing kit and getting a good result from that. So, Stephen, in the United States from Maine,
Yes,
what's the update on your corner of the world with things there?
Well, it's beautiful outside here as well, and I'm not going out. I was actually taking walks for a while, but I had an epiphany. I was walking and I smelled somebody's pipe smoke, and I thought, if I can smell pipe smoke, who knows what air I'm breathing, and I said, I'm just going to exercise in my apartment. So now every other day I walk up and down for half an hour in here and drive the guy underneath nuts. But, I get the same workout.
Same workout. Still fit and healthy then.
There you go. Yeah.
Still in the land of the living.
Yeah,
that's good. Now, in case anyone heard music there when Ben was talking, it's because Ben has a chap above him, funny enough, because you've just been talking about you must be annoying the guy below you, Steve. And there's a guy above Ben that's playing the piano, and Ben calls him Liberace. It's perhaps a reincarnation of Liberace, but unfortunately, we have some free license, copyright-free incidental music to back us on this particular show.
He just seems to go for very simple tunes, but his name's Alan, but he just I don't know much more about him, but he does play the piano. Yeah.
Well, he's quite good. We can always get him in to do our theme tune now and again, maybe. Andy Thomas, so any change of perspective since we last spoke on this coronavirus?
Well, I mean, we've had enormous changes in terms of the perception of what's going on, because as most of you will know, in the last week or so, we had the David Icke broadcast, which went out on the London Reel, channel, if you want to call it that. And of course, because that was also streamed courtesy of some other, shall we say, well-known platforms, there's been a real outcry. And because he perhaps failed to condemn, let's just put it like that, people burning masts, if indeed they are burning masts, and there's some dispute about that. But of course, that gave the mainstream all they needed to shut down any sensible conversation about 5G. And now anybody that links 5G with the virus, or to be honest, even mentions 5G, they're going to come off of YouTube, they're going to get deplatformed, and it's really growing. Even just this afternoon, there's another news story on the BBC website saying that apparently over the Easter weekend, more masts apparently were attacked. And I keep saying it apparently. Evidence for this is quite. We keep being told this is happening. We see a few images of a few fires, which could be somewhere. But anyway, okay, let's say they happen. And of course, that now enables the mainstream to condemn all conspiracy theories as actively dangerous, as a threat to public health and law and order. And they are now using that to try to shut down any discussion of this at all. And what I think is quite shocking is that when mainstream people then say, actually, I don't know about the virus, but I do think there's an issue with 5G. As the presenter Eamon Holmes on ITV, a big show for anybody that doesn't know, yesterday said, well, I don't agree that it's anything to do with the virus, but I do think people should have free speech about, discussing problems about 5G. He's been absolutely vilified. He is being attacked all over the media today. He's become the #1 enemy. So they always say, there's nobody in the mainstream that believes any of these theories about 5G, but that's because as soon as somebody in the mainstream does, of course, they get ostracized and then they become mavericks. And the presenter Amanda Holden also, she had put out stuff saying 5G is dangerous. She also now has been disgraced, forced to take all the posts down. And so here we are. We're living in a world where there is no such thing as free speech. But unfortunately, I mean, let's say, if people are setting light towers, that's probably not helpful. And what we're going to see, I think, in the next few weeks is a real crushing now of any conspiracy speculation, probably on anything in the mainstream. And that is a shame.
I can absolutely concur there, Andy, because I've just come off a 1-week ban on Facebook. And now this ban, I've noticed, is everywhere, on all social media platforms. Anyone who's got a slightly different opinion, there's posts being deleted. The posts that I was having deleted, they weren't even, particularly dangerous posts or particularly contentious posts. They were just things about how to protect your immune system, different theories on what it could be. So I wasn't saying, look, it's definitely this, but a possibility that something else might be going on. All of these were taken down. Several people I know were on bans. Social media is a disgrace at the moment. Facebook is a disgrace at the moment. I even came across a speech by Mark Zuckerberg talking about creating an open society, how that he will not take posts down that are too political or that can't be verified by tech companies. And yet you put something up about strengthening an immune system and it gets taken down. So he's saying one thing and his company is doing completely the opposite of that. And what I think, and I don't know if you concur with this, Andy, do you think there's a conflating of issues here deliberately? So, for instance, with the 5G aspects, I feel that there's two kind of camps. There's kind of like 5G might be actually causing these virus symptoms. In other words, there might not be a virus, but it might be causing the symptoms that look like a virus. And then there's the camp that you just mentioned, whereby, there might actually be a virus. 5G might not be causing it, but 5G will be detrimental to health, detrimental to people's immune systems, and that will kind of like make the virus worse or affect more people. So do you think there's a muddying of the waters where the mainstream is kind of merging it all together and then making us look like we're saying there's no virus at all, it's all 5G?
I think there is a conflating, and I mean, we need to be aware, of course, there are some people that don't still believe there's a virus. Now, I'm not in agreement with them. I have family members that work in the NHS as doctors and other staff, and there very definitely is something. And Ben, you seem to have had your own experience with this. But what's happening is anybody that has any alternative view at all on the virus is now being branded. And here are the normal terms we hear, especially on Radio 4. They are branded crackpot, conspiracy theorist, lunatic, conspiracy theorist, and this morning on Radio 4's Today programme, now even people that question just problems with EMF, they are deranged. So these are insulting and judgmental terms that are now coming in as routine, and the BBC especially are really encouraging that. And by doing that, all these different issues get conflated. Now, in fairness to the BBC, I should tell you that I got invited, strangely, onto BBC Ulster for their Talkback radio show just a few days ago. And it was a panel of experts saying there's no problem with 5G, all these people are mad. But to be fair, they did give a voice to people like me to say, yes, but there should be free speech about this. But what was interesting was the callers that called into the show, not one of them agreed with the experts. All of them were saying, we do think there is an issue with 5G. However, the problem is all of this in the end, gets mixed together and it's all branded lunatic conspiracy theories. And so because one faction of that is now seen as dangerous because towers apparently are getting damaged, all of them are dangerous by association. And I think this is something they've been waiting for a long time. And now they've got the hook they've needed for a while to say that anybody that questions the norm is a danger to society. And I am very worried about where that might go.
And also there's quite a few councils and countries that have actually banned 5G, or at least put a temporary hold on it. So, for instance, the Vatican does not have 5G. Brussels does not have 5G. Glastonbury, which was the obviously the famous festival, had 5G promoted at the festival by EE. Well, Somerset Council have now banned it until further notice. I think the country of Slovenia, I think, has banned 5G until further notice. So there is definitely more questions about it. But interestingly, with all of this, I mean, if you think about it, Andy, billions have been spent implementing this and getting this ready. So of course they're not going to go quietly. They're not just going to go, oh well, yeah, you're all right, let's just take the 5G towers down. Of course they're going to carry on and push this agenda forwards. And you probably come across this report, Andy, of this independent watchdog who has done some testing on 5G and claimed that it's safe. Have you come across that?
I have, and of course, its independence is heavily questioned in some areas. We should note here, and I don't want to hog this, but just to say that the problem we have with anybody that questions 5G is that they're then branded a conspiracy theorist. But as some of you here will know, actually, there are quite a lot of medical experts who question this. I mean, back in 2017, before 5G went online, there was a whole body of about 180 experts who were lobbying the EU to have a moratorium to say, we are not satisfied that this is safe. We need to do more tests. Now, they got ignored, of course, but we have people like Dr. Martin or Professor Martin Powell, Dr. Sarah Starkey, Dr. Erica Blythe-Mallory, or Mallory Blythe, rather. Many other people we could name who are medical experts who are questioning the safety of 5G. But that is never reported in the mainstream. And if you start to name people like that, the response is always to say, well, they may be mavericks, perhaps. Well, they're not mavericks. They're people very qualified, very educated, who are being sidelined because, as you say, there is enormous amounts of money at stake here. And absolutely, these companies are not going to go quietly and probably won't ever go at all. But, will we look back on this one day like we do lead pipes or maybe thalidomide, which all seemed like a very good idea at the time. But at the moment, they are destroying any dissent.
And anybody who would believe this report, this alleged independent report that's saying 5G is safe, two things I would say. Number one, who is really funding it? Who is behind it? What might their ties be to the 5G industry? And secondly, I'd really urge people to see a movie called Dark Waters. Nothing to do with 5G, but Dark Waters shows how companies can invest millions in defending very, very dangerous or allegedly dangerous things. So I don't know if you've heard of Dark Waters, but essentially the company DuPont, the chemical company, in the kind of like the 1980s, was pushing Teflon as this kind of like miracle substance that's highly waterproof and the slipperiest thing on earth. It turns out that huge amounts of extremely dangerous chemicals were involved in the processes of Teflon. It's kind of like a byproduct of fluoride. And the local people in the area were getting sick. Now they were basically saying, DuPont were basically saying, no, it's not happening. We've got tests to prove it's safe, to prove that everything is absolutely fine. Anyway, this lawyer got hold of it, and actually it turned out that it's not safe at all. And not only is it not safe, it's unbelievably toxic, and it's worldwide. These particles, these kind of fluoride particles, have gone into the system, and it's just absolutely everywhere. It's an absolutely horrific film, Dark Waters, but please go and see it. And I would like people, after they've seen that film, to question, are so-called independent sources to be trusted with this kind of thing? And I would say perhaps not. Perhaps some people might have a bit of a backhander. Perhaps some people have got ulterior motives. Maybe some people are connected in ways that we're not aware of to the very industry that are basically saying that it's safe. And also another thing I'd say is what companies tend to do is they tend to move the goalposts. So with Fukushima, there was kind of like a maximum limit of radiation that Japanese people could workers could have before it gets to an unsafe level. But because Fukushima was so radioactive, all they did was move the goalposts. They just raised how much would be a dangerous level. And that's exactly what DuPont did in the film Dark Waters. It was something to do with particles per billion of water of what is known as safe, what is kind of seen as safe, and they basically raised that and said, this level up here is safe, when really it should have been right down there. So I think with this report, 5G claiming that it's safe, I think it's just a case of moving the goalposts is all they've done with that.
I bet they couldn't make the charges stick against DuPont then with their Teflon products.
It's ongoing. Yeah.
Can I just really briefly add, when you look at most of the official independent 5G tests which say that it's safe, they always examine only a very narrow spectrum, and they're still fixated on this thing that mobile phones were looked into as, do they heat the brain? And they say no, there's no heating effect going on here, and that's what they say with 5G. Well, yes, except there are so many other issues. There are many other things which 5G does seem to affect. However, they don't tend to look at those in their reports. So they look at this very narrow band that's been declared as the test area, and then they say, well, no, it's fine, which maybe it is, but they don't look outside of that. And that's where the problems come. So there is something disingenuous with the very way that they do the tests. But there you go. We're entering a world now where even to question it, we could all be deplatformed here just as a result of even talking about it on this show.
Well, let's hope not.
It's a foolish world.
Carol, if we can come to you now, you're talking on a slightly wider wave band of frequencies because you're a channel.
Hi, Neil. Yeah.
So yeah, you've been working quite diligently in the last sort of few weeks with because we had you on our show last year, talking about I can't say it, Pleiadians. Pleiadians, yeah. If you'd explain to our listeners and viewers what your background is and the Pleiadians and the connection, and then bring it forward to what you're now getting present day, it would be most helpful.
Okay, thanks, Neil, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show. So I've got so much to say about my background and what's happening now. I don't really know where to start because there is so much happening, and these are unprecedented times. This event is much bigger than we realise. So I'm probably going to start off with the War of the Worlds, if that's okay.
Good movie.
It's not just a movie.
No, I knew you were going to go deeper than that.
Yeah. So when I first started to channel the Pleiadians consciously, 2009, 2010, because I'd always had a connection to them back to childhood. So I don't really want to talk about my stuff too much. I really want to get on to the more important stuff of what's happening now on a higher level, on a bigger level than what we're seeing in a 3D with the coronavirus, and explain some of that stuff. So basically what I was shown is that there's a war of the worlds, and they do call it the War of the Worlds, between light and dark forces happening on the Earth and above it. So there are ET races that are positive and negative, and they're at war, and they've been at war for a very long time, and that we do not come from here. I call it coming from the outside in, because we've come from outside to Earth. So, okay, so, sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, so going back to the time of Atlantis, the downfall of Atlantis was where it all began, in my understanding. The negative ET race or races saw Atlantis from above and decided to come in and take over, take charge, take control, take ownership of what was happening. not what was happening, but they wanted to infiltrate and control. So that was the downfall, the beginning of the downfall of Atlantis. Around about the same time, you had a meteor that hit the Earth, and I'm going to try and show this to you on the camera, because this is how they show me very much in images. And this is an image this is something they showed me recently. So at the time of Atlantis, something hit the Earth and knocked it off its course. So it kind of dropped down from one dimension to another. The consciousness, let me rephrase that, the consciousness of the Atlanteans dropped down from one level to another. So it dropped from a higher to a lower. Now, there's several aspects that happened at Atlantis. And the reason I'm starting back and explaining about Atlantis and the War of the Worlds is because it's very parallel to what's going on now. It's crucial. So a meteor hit the Earth at the time of Atlantis, helping to cause the downfall of Atlantis, as well as the negative ET races or race. So you had a meteor that hit the Earth, knocked it off its course. And now what's happening is the Earth is swinging back because the Earth was knocked off its axis, knocked off its original rhythm. So we're coming back to a time now where we're shifting back up. So the Earth is shifting back up onto its natural original axis. Our DNA is changing as well, because it was also changed at the time of Atlantis. So our DNA is raising naturally. It's like a coil that's been stretched. So if you imagine a coil being stretched into a string or a straight string, eventually it will go back to its natural pattern, its natural frequency, which is what's happening with our DNA at the moment and has been for some time. But we are also getting assistance with our DNA to help to shift it back to its original natural blueprint from positive star nations or positive ET races. So our DNA is changing back, our consciousness is raising, our awareness is raising. Atlantis will raise again, which I believe was in Antarctica. So as the Earth shifts back onto its natural axis, the Earth is shifting, land will shift and change position and raise. So I have been told that Atlantis will raise again, that everything's going to change. I mean, this time is absolutely everything. So one of the things about Atlantis is that the Atlanteans didn't see this negative energy coming towards them. So they didn't really have a choice. We are seeing it, and we do have a choice. The vast majority of us are aware and awake and conscious and know that the ETs are real in a positive and negative way. A lot of us have already woken up, and the rest are to follow. So the Atlanteans didn't see it coming. We, however, do see it coming. So therefore, we have the ability to change things. The Atlanteans didn't really see it coming because they were operating on a much higher frequency, a much higher vibration on a high end of the spectrum. And the negative energy, they weren't able to, because they didn't vibrate with it, their frequencies didn't match. They didn't see it coming. It was like a storm coming out of nowhere. They didn't see it coming. So, but we do. So we have the ability to change the course of possibilities that could occur if we don't step up. We need to take our power back. We need to raise our energy, raise our frequency, because that is very important. Now, some people are saying or believing or thinking that being love and being light and being kind and being good and being spiritual and mostly being love doesn't have any effect. And actually it has everything to do with it, because if you raise your energy to as high as you can get it, nothing can affect you externally, because you're a force of energy, you're a divine light, you are a beautiful being. Your powers are immense and vast, and you don't even understand how and the things that you can do, and you don't understand how vast that is. If you were tapped in, turned on and tuned in to your power and your essence, there's nothing on this earth or any ET negative energy that's aimed at you or targeting you or homed in on you that could affect you to the full ability that they want to.
So you were talking in before we started that you channeled the knowledge from the Pleiadians that they're saying that this coronavirus is definitely a man-made virus.
Yeah.
So what have they said? Why is that, and what's the purpose behind that?
Okay, well, so there's two energies hitting the earth at the moment. One is positive and one is negative. And can I, before I answer your question, Neil, can I just explain something? Because it's also in part of it. So you might have to remind me of your question though.
Okay.
So there's a positive energy hitting the earth like a beam of light, and there's a negative energy hitting the earth like a beam of light, and they're both opposites. One's positive, one's negative. And this is very much to do with ET races and energy. So as the beams are hitting the earth is going to twist and divide and become two. So the beams are coming down, the earth is going to twist and divide into two. One is going to evolve and go into a higher frequency, and one is either going to stay where it is or go into a lower frequency. So that's something they've showed me that is either going to happen or has a highly possibility that it's going to happen. So in answer to your question just now about what has this got to do with the coronavirus, well, we're at war. And the war is not the coronavirus. The war is on humanity and the consciousness of humanity and the evolvement and the ascension. Everything is tied in together, and there's several things all happening at once on Earth and above it that we're seeing and that we're not seeing. So there's several things at play here. It's all we're being shown is the coronavirus and the 5G to a certain degree at the moment. But there is a lot going on behind the scenes. If you imagine you're sat in the theatre and you've got this play on the stage, and that's all about the coronavirus. Well, behind the stage, behind the curtain, there's actually a multitude of things going on at the moment. You know, things are being put into place. We do have help and assistance. Stars are lining up. Our DNA is changing. We originally, what they showed me a couple of days ago, is that we originally had 13 strands of DNA. Or that we are going back to so we either originally had 13 strands of DNA, and this is very new to me, I've had this in the last couple of days, or we will be becoming 13 strands of DNA. So we've either had it in the past, or it's a more evolved than we even were before our DNA was changed by negative ET energy. So we're either evolving to a place above where we were before they changed us, or we're going back to our original blueprint. So what has this got to do with coronavirus? Well, it's got everything to do with coronavirus, because in the very beginning, at the downfall of Atlantis, negative ET energy came in and overtook the Atlanteans and the population and dumbed them down and changed our DNA and changed everything, changed the course of the earth, and the poles shifted, putting everything off its axis. So since then, they've been running the show. So they've set up systems on Earth, like school systems, like banking systems, like money, like pharmaceutical companies, like governments, and they've put the law systems in place. They've put every system that we have on Earth is created by negative ET races. Whether it's one particular race or it's a group of them, they're all in charge and controlling us en masse through the different systems. So the coronavirus, and they've put us at war with each other. They've put us at war with each other. So they've divided us, black against white, rich against poor, young against old, creed against creed, race against race, language against language, religion against religion, belief against belief, to be at war with each other so that we are distracted and operating on a lower frequency. Mm-hmm. And also they have created several events within our history. That things like Hitler and the Nazis and genocides and holocausts and situations and conditions, and to keep us dumbed down, to keep us in control, to keep us in fear. What's happening at the moment is probably the biggest, most profound time on earth that's ever happened, ever. We've never had a situation like this before. This is either the beginning of a new dawn for us as humanity, or it's the end. Now, so I don't believe it's the end. I believe there's a very positive outcome, but they work through fear and lowering our vibration. So it is absolutely essential that we keep our energy and our frequency and our vibration as high as we can.
Because the coronavirus's weapons that are being used against us, essentially, to distract us. Stephen, if I could come to you in Maine. Now, you've been looking into a lot of David Icke, and some of the things there that Carol's been mentioning, David Icke has almost said similar things within his research over the last sort of 20 years. But I mean, what's your take on David Icke? Do you have a positive aspect of him, or a completely, do you think he's baloney, or do you think he's somewhere in the middle?
Well, I did watch the entire program. And I watched it with an open mind. I don't agree with him that there's no virus, and I tend to think that's pretty dangerous. I think it's unfortunate that he came to that conclusion, because on everything else, I think he's seeing pretty correctly. But on that one particular thing, I don't agree with him. And I think if you start going out and ripping your masks off like they used to burn draft cards or bras or whatever, I think that's trouble, because it'll bring, as Andy said, it now brings the establishment down on us and labels us all as kooks,
It's handy to rip your bra off, because you make 2 masks from one, can't you, out of that? There is a kind of plus point to it,
Yeah, there you go.
But do you get much of David Icke in the States? Is people aware of him in the States like we are in the UK?
I don't know, because I don't really associate with too many other open-minded people, so I really don't have a sense of that. I mean, the only thing I get is on YouTube, and what I see is pretty much, I think people are pretty annoyed at him. Actually, there's a lot of people that are very down on him, but again, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. People have a tendency to do that. They don't think for themselves and say, well, this part I like and this part I don't like, and so on. They're like cheering for a football team. They're totally for them or they're totally against them. So that tendency to be polarized is itself a big problem. That we have to, as Carol was saying, we have to rise above polarization. I think that's a really key part of it. So if you do that and you look at David Icke that way, I say this guy's really thinking out of the box. He's very intelligent, but he seems to be a little off here, so you kind of discern, what I could go with and what I can't.
I guess David has always been like that. I mean, if you take the reptilian and the queen is a lizard thing, he's been saying that for years. And a lot of people I've come across are of the frame of mind that, yes, a lot of what David Icke talks about in terms of the Illuminati and the secret societies and the things that are going on and the, Agenda 21 is very bang on. But as soon as he talks about the reptilian side of things, people think he's a lunatic. So I think with David Icke, it is a case of pick and mix. You take the parts that you feel are right for you and you leave the parts that you don't feel right is for you, and that's how it should be with everyone. Every source of information, every speaker should be like that, really.
Ben, you saw David Icke last year, didn't you, at one of his tours? I mean, do you still kind of stand in basic line with David Icke's kind of take on the whole thing here?
Well, I think what Andy said is perfect. Andy C, what he just said. If you pick, it's a pick and mix. You've got to take what you accept or what you believe is real, what you conclude is real, and ignore everything that you don't. I mean, David himself actually recommends this for what he himself says. I did go and see him. I went and saw him, and he was at Oh, he's in Newcastle. I went to see him in Newcastle. It was a secret location. You can't actually book a David Icke gig now without, you need security, you need secrecy, otherwise there'll be protesters outside because he's so controversial. It's yeah, I mean, him being banned from London Real, I thought was disgraceful. I mean, the attacks on London Real were awful. And I mean, I know that not everything he said was true. I know that in that particular interview.
Can I just jump in there? Because you were saying that he was banned from London Real. When did that happen?
It happened. It was last week when he did his second interview with London Real. It wasn't London Real that banned him from him. London Real themselves were banned. The video was banned from YouTube.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you. Yeah.
No. It's sorry. I just should have clarified. Yeah, I did go and see him. In fact, I tried to attend all his tours dates whenever he's in the UK, wherever I can. He made a lot of interesting points about the coronavirus. Now, I do believe there is a coronavirus. It is a virus. I mean, I've lost 2 of my brother porters to this virus at my hospital, and these are guys who really I'm very close to because they're fellow porters, and it's devastating to lose them. It was a virus indeed. This being said, 5G I believe is something I think is a threat. 5G I don't believe is healthy for us. I believe it is some kind of electromagnetic weapon. I mean, Barry Trower, I know people laugh at Barry Trower and they just try to discredit him, but I mean, he goes back to source articles from the Soviet Union in the 70s where they were doing experiments on electromagnetic.
Can you just tell viewers and listeners who Barry Trower is, those that don't know?
He's a man who knows an awful lot about electromagnetism and its effect on the human brain. Now, he says he's a scientist. Yeah. I know some people say he's not, but I mean, he does. I believe he is a scientist. He has had government contracts and things like that. So I don't believe 5G is the cause of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 disease. I don't believe it's the cause of the COVID-19 disease. It's appeared in places which have never been exposed to 5G. They had a suspected case on the island of St. Helena. Place which is a tiny remote island in the middle of nowhere, but the 5G I think is unhealthy, and the effects 5G have on the body include the compromising of the immune system, and when that happens you are more susceptible general to viral infections, indeed any other kind of disease, and so it is indirectly going to make the COVID-19 disease worse for people who are exposed to it. I don't believe it's right to go out and carry out attacks against these antennae. I mean, the antennas that are attacked, I've not seen any actual evidence that these were 5G antennas. The reason is 5G antennas are actually quite small. These are quite large objects, quite large machines that will be worked on by engineers. I do think it's strange how they've been allowed to continue this work during the lockdown. But
isn't it just?
5G antennas.
Essential work. Okay, right, whatever.
Well, it's tied in together.
Yeah. 5G.
They've. My understanding is that they have created this situation or scenario or virus so they can distract us completely and lock us down and keep us in our homes in order so that they can put up the 5G. But there's also a lot of other stuff going on as well. On the 3D Earth level and also on the higher levels, higher dimensions. So it's not just one thing. There's at least three or four different things going on.
Oh, more than that. I mean, it is exactly. There are. It's the associate issues to do with the coronavirus. Is the fact that governments are, in a sense, this is almost like what they've been waiting for, the opportunity. Just like to put us under more and more controls, to bring in these Orwellian measures, to put queues outside the supermarkets. It reminds me of stories of Russia from the Soviet era where there were shortages and things like that. And people carrying
shoes from the 70s.
I go in there and it's like, I go into the shops and there's like half the shelves are empty. So I'm concerned about what you said about the spiritual side of things. I know you covered it in detail. I don't want to go into detail now, but yes, that's real. It is about spiritual forces at loggerheads too. So, yeah.
Andy Thomas. Now, 5G. Obviously, a lot has been spoken about it. My suspicions, and it's only just a suspicion. I don't know. Do you think that it could be maybe a red herring that everyone starts to focus on the other enemy here, which is people are saying it's 5G, but in fact there could be something else out there that we're not looking at, and 5G is a distraction as the blame?
I think that 5G is just one tiny component in this. I suspect Ben is right. I think if it is correct that 5G is not good for your health, then yeah, having it around might well make you more susceptible to a virus. So it's not a good combo to have. I doubt that it is the cause of all the problems, because as already has been acknowledged in the mainstream correctly, some countries that don't even have 5G yet are getting cases. And also, if it was 5G causing it, then you would expect the numbers to just go on and on and on. There shouldn't be any tail off in numbers, whereas we are seeing now in places like Italy and Spain, the numbers, they're tailing off now. So in my view, I don't think that is the main thing, although I do think it could be a problem in its own right. Okay, but yeah, there's something much, much bigger going on. What I think is unfortunate at the moment, though, is that, as you're intimating there, I think a lot's got put onto that, and they, as we've already acknowledged in this conversation, that they're using that to bring down any useful discussions. And I do admire David Icke, and I admire his work, but like has been expressed here, I don't agree with everything. But I think the problem is he is seen in the end to represent all truth seekers, and he doesn't. And I think that's a big problem. And there are people that absolutely are devoted to him. And if David says it, well, it must be true. But the trouble is that is perceived from the outside as being, well, he represents all of us, when he really doesn't. So we need to sort of in some way here make a sort of a break and say, look, that's David Icke. He's got every right to believe what he believes. Good luck to him. But there are many other viewpoints and there are many other issues going on. And, the causes of the virus, the spread of it, the numbers, the tests, there are many unanswered questions. And I do think that we should start applying ourselves to those as well now, and put aside anything which, as you say, it can draw you away from talking about what really matters. And the key thing, as has already been touched on here, is it is being used, whatever the cause, to close down our freedom. We are entering a world of control and surveillance, and police powers have come in, which you could never have dreamt of in any modern times. And the hope is that they will be rescinded eventually when this dies down. But what else will we be left with? You may have heard that there's an app now which they're recommending we will all have on our phones, and initially voluntary, which will tell you if anybody around you's got symptoms, or if you yourself have had symptoms, then you'll be able to know where all these people have gone and who they're meeting. And that's the classic Orwellian tool, of course. And in the end, that will be something which you won't be able to operate in society without. So that's one big problem. And then the big problem hurtling towards us like an express train is probable mandatory vaccination. In a year, 18 months' time, I would imagine that we will be basically expected to queue up for a vaccine. And maybe they won't make it compulsory officially, but it will become clear that if you don't have it, you won't be able to go to certain places, you won't be able to function in society. And that's not science fiction, that's not a conspiracy theory, that is openly being discussed now in the mainstream. And that's where we're heading. And of course, if you believe vaccines are wonderful things, well, then you'll welcome it. But if you do have any concerns at all, then naturally you are going to begin to worry that this is something that's going to change the very sort of notion of what it is to be a human being. And if you are worried about the side effects of it, and the fact that it's a very rushed into production vaccine, that's going to be a big problem. And certainly I think you can expect now, if we're not already there, that anybody that questions vaccination will be treated like they're treating the 5G believers. The danger to see, and will have a voice. So sadly, I know that sounds depressing, but I do think that that's what we're heading towards, unless lots of people stand up as one and say, hang on a minute, that's not the way we want to go here. But at the moment, many are welcoming such a world because they think it will save them. And I think that's one of the big problems.
Ben, now you wanted to clarify something, didn't you?
Yeah, it's to do with David Icke and his treatment. I mean, I personally am a free speech absolutist, and I would not support David Icke being removed from YouTube if he was a flat earther, quite frankly, or anything. I mean, as much as I'm not a flat earther, of course, either, but I'm totally against that. But he does really deserve to be allowed to say what he thinks. And if we live in a country where people can speak and think as they feel fit, which I believe we should do, then his removal from YouTube was disgraceful. Absolutely. I also, Andy, I also want to talk about what Andy said about language, the way the media is referring to people. Now, the term conspiracy theorist has been said many, many times. It's been related to Eamon Holmes, who has been listening to David Icke, because Eamon's the guy who knows him and has interviewed him and stuff like that, and he's been listening to him. So, seed planted, stuff like that. The term conspiracy theory did not exist. It can't be found in any lexicon before 1964. Why 1964? That's when the Warren Commission was published, the investigation into the Kennedy assassination. They needed some label to slap on people so that they could be ignored, so that it's just you just tar them with this brush, and then everything they say is just regarded as nonsense, and they're still doing it today.
I totally back that up.
Going back to the vaccines that Andy Thomas was talking about, I've noticed this is the big push. Some interesting things here, though. Trump and Boris, both of those are very much contentious people in the world of politics. Some people love Trump, some people hate Trump. Bill Gates wants to push mandatory vaccines. Trump is pushing against Bill Gates. I think Trump is on the light side. Love him or loathe him. I mean, he is a bit of a buffoon, but I think he's on the light side. There's a whole different angle to this in terms of the QAnon thing, but that's maybe another discussion for another time. These vaccines, what I want to know is that there have been several effective drugs that have been proven by the University of Queensland, Australia, in terms of anti-malarial drugs. I think it's something like hydroxychloroquine or something like that, some kind of long-winded Latin name. Also, HIV drugs have been looked at with some very effective results in terms of pretty much curing people of coronavirus. So my question is, why would we need vaccines against something that is already curable, that we already know drugs work for? And this isn't just me saying it. There are several reports showing that this is the case. So we actually probably don't really need the vaccines because we've got, this hydro, whatever it is. So there's that. Something I want to ask Carol, actually. This is a huge, great monkey wrench in the whole works of all to do with this. Are people aware of this giant comet that's coming towards Earth on the 29th of April? Something like 5 times the size of Jupiter that's going to be flying past, that everyone's going to be viewing in the sky. Is everyone aware of that?
I've heard of it.
You won't be viewing it in the sky because it's sadly broken up in the last few days into lots of little bits. And yes, I know they were hoping it was going to be as bright as Venus in the sky. It won't be. Sadly, it's fallen apart. We're talking about Comet Atlas here. That's what they called it, Atlas.
Oh, it's got a name.
But no, it's now. Sadly, we were all hoping for something spectacular, but it won't be. It won't be visible. It will be so dim by the time it goes by. It will be gone. By the way, you could see it about 2 weeks ago. I saw it through binoculars. It was a very, very faint smudge, because I'm quite interested in things like this. But no, I'm afraid it won't be very spectacular. I'm sorry to say.
Oh well,
If I could.
I was just going to say this could be good news and bad news, because my question to Carol was going to be, do you think that's actually Nibiru and the return of the Anunnaki? But it looks like it's not.
Well, sorry, I was just about to say something then, and it went. There is mass UFO sightings going on Earth at the moment that we are not being shown on the media. And we won't be shown. I also believe there's actually going to be a genuine sighting, a genuine landing. So I know that's going to sound quite funny to a lot of people, but this stuff is real. We've been lied to on a mass scale, basically about everything, about the Earth's history, about where we came from, about who we are. about the true history of the earth, the real science, the real history. You know, everything we've been taught is a complete lie. And when you start looking into this stuff, simple things like UFOs and abductions and contactees, it all starts to begin to make sense and research it. So I'm not saying that you should believe me without question, because you should question things. You should question everything that you've been taught. So there's so much going on here at the moment. The coronavirus it's because it's such a mass scale, it had to be designed and well organized before they actually released it. This is not something that was released on accident without any purpose or negative agenda. This was well planned, well prepared beforehand. So and also, one thing I want to get across as much as I possibly can, that this is a war on consciousness, a war on humanity, and we need to take action. Yes, we need to be love and light, but we need to take action. We need to stand up and say, no, this is not okay, this is not right, and I'm not going to allow the extinction of humanity to happen, because the earth is going to, the two energies hitting the earth at the moment are going to twist the earth into two, and one is going to go into a higher frequency or higher dimension, and the other one is going to stay where it is or drop into a lower state of awareness and energy. So, you know, these are critical times. This has never happened before. And what I'm saying, I'm not saying lightly. You know, this extreme times. It's critical, it's pivotal, it's crucial, it's severe. There's severity with it, and there is an absolute parallel between now and what happened in Atlantis, with one exception, that we have the ability to change things. If we get up and do something, if we take action, we have to act, because as David Icke says, now I don't believe everything that he says is true. I think he's a great man, and I think he's got huge backbone to be able to get up there and say what he believes, and that's what it's about. He's speaking his truth, whether it's right or wrong, whether you believe him or not. Now, I don't believe everything he says, and I do believe that the coronavirus is real and that we are at war, but the war is not the coronavirus. The war is the negative agenda and the systems they have in place.
And we haven't even got the Elon Musk's 10,000 5G satellites in space yet. So imagine what they're going to be like when they're switched on.
No, it's going to be 42,000. That's the ultimate goal. 42,000. Yep.
Wow.
Great, isn't it?
Wow. At what point are the good guys going to step in? And because the thing is, I've heard this argument many times before, that it's up to humanity to change it, that, you know, we are the cavalry we're waiting for. But this is too big for any one person. OK, you, me, all of you guys, we can't just shut down 5G. This is done by corporations with billions of pounds.
And Andy, I'm so sorry, darling, to interrupt, to intervene. One thing I just want to mention, because it's in relation to what you're saying, is that the Rainbow Warriors are a prophecy by the Cree and the I think it's the Hopi, but they are prophesied by the Native Americans and other ancient people. And actually, when you look at the prophecy, that is the time we are in now. So it is us. We are the Rainbow Warriors. We are the Starseeds. We are the people we are waiting for to come and rescue us. And we need to stop looking and waiting for someone to do something, someone to come and save us, because we need to take back our power and realize that we have huge potential that we could never understand with the mindset that we're working with at the moment. We have unbelievable abilities and powers and intuition and knowledge and understanding and awareness and creativity, and we have so much potential that was changed from us or taken away from us when our DNA was changed. And that's what we're going back to. Everything is shifting and changing. The earth is changing. We are changing. Stars are aligning. This is the time of the Rainbow Warriors that was predicted about. I don't think many people have put those two things together, but we are the ones we've been waiting for, and we need to take action. Yes, we need to be love and light, but we need to balance it. Because before we were either love and light and sitting there doing nothing, just meditating, or we were protesting in the streets and shouting and crying and saying no. Now we need to bring those two things together and integrate them within ourselves and be both, and raise our energy and stop this from happening. Because as David Icke says, the doors are closing, and if we don't stand up and take action, whatever that may be, then the doors are going to close. This is a time frame that we have. It's not going to last forever. The stars are aligning. This is a special time, and an extreme time that has probably never happened before on Earth, with the exception of Atlantis. And Atlantis fell down. There was a downfall of Atlantis. So we have one opportunity now. This is not going to continue. It's either gonna be a positive outcome, which I believe it will, or it is either the beginning of a new dawn, a new era, or it's the end as we know it. But having said that, some of us will evolve and raise our consciousness where we do leave the planet, and some of us will stay. Some of us operating on a lower frequency, those who aren't so aware of what's really going on, which is why I'm trying to get it across to people as much as I possibly can. You have to raise your awareness, your consciousness, your vibration, and be love.
Okay, we better take a break there. Sorry to interrupt, Carol. I know I'm going to stand up, not for my rights, but for a cup of coffee. So if we just take a 5-10 minute break, everybody, we'll come back in a few minutes on the Paranormal Peep Show. So if we just say, what's the time now? 20:32. If we come back about 20:42, is that okay?
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Cool. All right. So mute your mics. I'll still keep on recording. It just saves me trying to, fiddle about with things. And, use your loo or whatever you need to do, cigarettes, whatever, coffees, teas, whatever. And we'll come back in about, 10 minutes or so. Okay? All right, guys. Great. Thanks so far. Cheers.
Hi, Andy. All right.
Hello, Ben. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. How are you getting on? How's the
Yeah, I'm
family?
good. Yeah, they're doing well. Yeah, as I say, I mean, my stepdaughter's a trainee doctor. Her partner is a doctor up in Birmingham and Coventry. And I'll tell you what, some of the stories that we're hearing, anybody that says there's no virus, in my view, is going mad. I'm really interested to hear your testimony. You were saying about you'd lost some friends, yeah?
Oh, two porters, yeah, have died. Oscar and Rico, their names were. I've not actually seen them for a while because I've been out of portering now since 2012. But I remember them. I remember them well. You never forget these people.
No.
And they died. They caught the COVID-19 at the hospital, which is, of course, unfortunately, healthcare people are the most likely to get it. And there's been a number of people actually passed away. A number of doctors and nurses.
I saw that on the news. Yeah.
There's been like a roll of honour on the news, and yeah, Rico and Oscar were on there as well. I mean, this is something that I suppose I'm glad I'm not involved myself anymore.
What are you doing at the moment?
I'm self-employed, doing several jobs actually: gardening, house cleaning, dog walking. It's,
well, hey,
it's much easier.
What he's doing.
Yeah, I'm actually back at work now after my lockdown. Only for 3 hours a day, but it's better than nothing. So
Yeah,
but I tend to wear my normal clothes when I'm out. I mean, I have work clothes with like boots and like I have a yellow waistcoat and things, the gilet jaune. But I don't wear those because it's something, I've heard the police are stopping people and saying, where are you going? And if you say you're going to work, they'll say, what's your job? And I've heard that they send you home if they say, oh, that's not good enough, you've got to go home.
At least they don't hit you with sticks here.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. In India, they're doing that. They're hitting people with sticks.
Oh, God.
Of course, that's a traditional thing, though. They call them latis or something like that. I mean, that goes back,
Yeah, I think they're very authoritarian there, and I think they kind of just take it for granted you're going to get whacked with something.
Sadly, some countries have a natural tendency to authoritarianism. China, I think, is one of them. India as well, you mentioned, and of course they're using the full extent of all the power they can have. I mean, China already has a lot of this Orwellian infrastructure in place. They have
the social credits, the whole social credits thing. I mean, we're going there now. Yeah,
I mean, that's like the social credit system is a terrible thing. I mean, it's not. It may be confined to one country, but China has a huge population. In fact, almost a quarter of the people in the world actually live in China, which means that anything that happens there is going to affect the whole world.
And also, we're just a hair's breadth away from that. If they're monitoring cell phones according to whether you contacted anybody with the coronavirus, pretty soon it'll be, what's your attitude and, that kind of thing. And,
well, I mean, Huawei, the company that's putting in 5G, Huawei is a Chinese company. It's a state-owned Chinese company. It's and it's been we've basically contracted it to install the 5G. I mean, Trump is now in big trouble because he's actually trying to cancel Huawei's contract in the United States. I just read that. Where did I see that?
I thought that he had. I thought he'd already outlawed any businesses doing sort of, work with them.
Maybe he has. I mean, there's a talk. I mean, apparently the director of Huawei is like going, oh, that's and sort of like has made several veiled threats towards Trump, and not that scares Trump, but I do hope there are people like looking after him. I hope there are people, because I think there must be, otherwise he'd be dead by now.
Well, that must be true. Yes, you would have thought so, wouldn't you?
He'd be like Kennedy by now if there weren't people with clout taking care of him. And it's like what Andy was saying about, it seems an insurmountable kind of situation, doesn't it? Maybe I should say it's on the air, but.
Okay, well, we can start if you like, Ben. So what I'll do.
I think we already did.
I forgot to count you guys in. Right, so what I'll do, I'll count you in again. I'd like to come to Stephen for the take on the US with Trump, as we've been talking about him. And you also spoke, Stephen, before about the guy that I think was the mayor of New York, and you thought he was doing a good job or something.
Yeah, Andrew Cuomo. Yeah.
So maybe we could talk a bit about him. But Andy Chaplin, do you want to bring us back in?
Yeah, okay.
And you can throw that question over to Stephen.
Right, go for it.
Okay, so here we go. Part 2, the Paranormal Peep Show Coronavirus Special, starting in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show. Now, our friend in the States, Stephen, I understand things are quite bad in America. The number of deaths and infection cases have skyrocketed. What's your thoughts on that at the moment?
Well, it's bad not where I am necessarily. I'm in a kind of a small to middle-sized city, and in Maine, up here in the uppermost regions of the East Coast, we've seen very few cases relatively. The other thing about Portland, I don't know about the rest of Maine, but the people are very civic conscious. There's really a consciousness here of everybody's going to cooperate and be thoughtful and be responsible. That's very strong in the culture here in this city. So, I mean, really, we haven't had much problems here. But in New York City, which is only a couple states away, it's horrific, you know. So I've been kind of keeping an eye on that.
Plague pits, haven't they, Stephen?
They have what? I'm sorry?
They've literally got plague pits being dug.
They do. They do. Mass graves, yeah, that they're bulldozing in. So, you know, I don't know whether they just happen to be first in time or whether they happen to be a particularly bad case. And it's really a crucial distinction. If they just happen to be first because they have a lot of people coming in from other countries, then that means that everybody else is in for the same thing and they're kind of the precursor. That's the worst case scenario. If they just happen to be a bad area and other people, you know, other cities may not get so much affected, that's totally different. But I tend to think maybe it's the first option. So it's very worrying. And the leadership here is frightening because it seems like, to me, this is my personal take on it, and I have to tell you that I'm very liberal, and I also tend to be a mystical liberal. So I'm not a humanist, you know, I'm not an existentialist, I'm a mystic, but I tend to be very liberal. So the way I see Trump is somebody that's, first off, sociopathic. You know, I think he really doesn't have a moral rudder at all. And secondly, I think he literally fakes it up there. He gets up in these, you know, presentations, and he has something that somebody's read for him, which is at certain intellectual level. And every once in a while, he'll look up and put in a comment of his own, and it's on a totally different intellectual level, you know. And, you know, and he just kind of says something that sort of sounds good, and it's kind of sing-songy, and then he goes back to his prepared script, and it's frightening because
couldn't that be argued with a lot of other presidents, such as Mr. Autocue himself, Obama, who actually once thanked himself for coming to Italy because he read the wrong autocue?
I don't know. He seemed to be pretty smart, but then I thought he was funny until I found out that he had a comedian. I mean, he had a comedian on staff that prepared all his jokes, you know, or not, yeah, young white guy, you know. So I don't know. I feel like we're kind of rudderless over here. And that the people around him are trying to run the country in spite of him. That's kind of the vibe. But they can't fight it. You know, they can't fight him. So
that would be the case.
He wants to get everybody back to work now, is what he wants to do, regardless.
It's a bit early by the sounds of it.
The governors are freaking out and trying to band together, and he's fighting them. He's trying to clamp down and say, I have full power over everything. I have total power, is what he's saying.
Well,
literally.
I'm enjoying my spring break. I don't want to go back to work.
Yeah.
Do you think that Trump will suffer in the presidential election? Because I know some people virtually blame him for some of the deaths for not acting quickly enough. Do you think that will come through?
I don't think we have free elections here. I think they're rigged, flat out.
If they
Not
were
even
big,
a little
surely
bit.
Hillary would get in. Surely Hillary would get in if they're rigged.
Well, no, it's the people behind both Hillary and Donald Trump are the same people. So they didn't care which one got in, as long as it was one of them who would do their bidding. That's the way I look at it.
But Trump is a renegade. He's a complete.
I don't think so. I don't agree.
He's completely uncontrollable.
I don't agree. I think that he was when he first got in, but I think they very quickly made it clear to him that they could get him out anytime they wanted, and he had to toe the line or else. So ever since then, he's been towing the line.
Which is probably true of most presidents, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Surely, why would the media hate him? Because the media, let's face it, absolutely hate Trump. Whereas with their golden boy Obama, he could do no wrong. So if Trump cured cancer, the media would say he's taking away jobs from cancer charities.
Well, I don't know. I do know that they gave him a huge amount more airtime than they gave anybody else. And that's
I've got a back Andy up on this. I've got to back Andy up on this.
Ben, yeah, you're a Trump's. You went into London when everyone was booing Trump. You went there as a brave man by yourself and cheered him on. So yeah, what's your take on Trump, how he's handling this crisis?
Oh, it's such a huge subject. We probably don't go into. People don't have time to go into it in detail, which is a shame. But I do disagree with Steve on this. Trump is a product of the post 2016 era, just like Brexit. I know I'm going to go into controversial areas like QAnon, but there is a real QAnon. I know there are many fake ones. There's at least 3 or 4 I know are fake. There's 2 people now seriously trying to say they faked QAnon. And there are fake Q posts, of course, But this answers Andy's question about, well, look, what chance do we have? I mean, I take Carol's point about the spiritual side of things, but the spiritual side and the political side are linked through things like the 100th monkey effect. But the fact that things have happened in the world, especially in the last 5 years, which are not what the Illuminati intended. They really didn't want Trump. I think Trump is a renegade. I think he still is. Now, it's true that he has been threatened. He doesn't have everything his way either. He has a big family, which of course makes him vulnerable, because I'm sure he cares more about them than he does about himself. But he's still somebody who was never meant to be president. He really was not. The fact that he's still president is a niggle in the Illuminati's in their mind. It's a splinter in their mind. So there are the process that Carol talks about, the spiritual process, is, I think, bearing fruit in the real world, the material world, in certain plans breaking down, plans that the Illuminati have been hatching for decades of breaking down. Now, among these, I think, is COVID-19. I think it's good. There's a chance it will backfire on them. In fact, maybe it already is.
I think that's what's happened. I think they didn't expect humanity's consciousness to start raising, and it's almost like a tidal wave. They've put this out into the public with the design of controlling us and dumbing us down even more. And what's happened is the consciousness and humanity is the consciousness is raising of humanity. So that's kind of, it's like a tsunami where it hits and then it doubles back. The effect of it is doubling back. That's actually what's going on. I believe, in my opinion, that's what's going on.
So, Carol, I mean, out of interest, how do you think that the raising of consciousness is manifesting at the moment there? Where do you see that going on, like right now, in sort of everyday life?
People are waking up. People are asking questions. People are not accepting what the lies that are being told to them previously, where they would just accept things. People are waking up, albeit slowly. This is a short window of time that we have, and people have been put on lockdown and made to stay at home. That's actually a good thing, because it gives us time to sit and meditate, and to read books, and to connect with family, and to do things that we, in our normal everyday lives, that we wouldn't have had time to do before that. So it does affect us on an everyday level, but there's so much going on here. There's so much going on. We're overwhelmed and bombarded by things that are going on a higher level, and physically, and with the news, and with the media, and everything that's hitting us. The way it kind of overwhelmed and on overload at the moment. If we can just take the time to meditate for even a couple of minutes a day, meditation is taught to sports people in order for them to win and achieve and success. So, meditation does have an effect. All of this, idea that conspiracy theories are cracked and not to be believed, and that you're not psychic and you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it, you can't touch it, therefore it's not real. Well, actually, that is a load of crap. It's absolutely a load of crap. And if you really look into science, science will tell you that we actually do have an electromagnetic energy field, which the New Ages or the conspiracy theories or the I don't like the word New Age and I don't like the word conspiracy theories, because those two words have been designed or implemented by the negative agenda to be they have very much a negative connotation. So those two words, I don't like them. Because we are divine beings, and our beauty and our essence and the abilities we have because of our DNA, this is not mystical stuff. This comes down to science and DNA and chemicals in the brain and DMT. You know, when someone has an excess of DMT that's released in the brain, as I did through trauma, that releases DMT in the brain that causes psychic ability and awareness, and it causes you to open up and wake up. So these mystical New Age conspiracies are real, and it comes down to science. Psychic abilities and awareness and raising of consciousness and energy and telepathy and abilities are science. They're not mystical, they're not New Age, they're not out there. They're very real things that we all have abilities to do. And I am very passionate about it, because we've had the wall pulled over our eyes. You know, we've been blinded to believe one thing when actually the very opposite is true. And yes, it is unbelievable, but we need to do it in stages so that we process and understand things at stages, and we are evolving and our consciousness is raising. So for example, if we don't believe in ghosts, we're going to start seeing stuff that will clarify that there are ghosts. So whatever level we're at, our consciousness is expanding and developing very quickly. I was in the supermarket the other day. I just want to give you a quick example. I'll give you a quick example. I was in the supermarket the other day, and they've got it's quite a big supermarket, and they've got a huge ceiling, like it must be 100 foot or something. And I could feel this energy above me. And now I'm quite aware, conscious and awake. And I can connect to beings like the Pleiadians, which we all can. It's just wherever we're at, it's a stage of development. So I'm ahead of some people and I'm behind of some people. So for example, people that don't believe in ghosts will start to see them. People who don't believe in real dreams will start to have them. People who don't believe they're psychic will start to have them. We're developing at a rapid space, and things are happening on a daily basis. Whatever happens physically also happens on a spiritual level. And things have increased to the point that things are not just happening on a daily basis. With the coronavirus, they're happening on an hourly basis now. So when you have something physically happening on Earth, it happens on a spiritual level as well. So everything is increased. It's like we're on autopilot or on charge, on supercharge, where things have increased. So the experience I had the other day in the supermarket was that I could feel an energy above my head, and I kept looking up, not knowing what it was. And then I looked up, and there was like a window, not like a skylight up in the ceiling, and this is like 100 foot. And it was a bird flying over. It was the seagulls or the pigeons or whatever birds it was. And I was like, oh my God. So that's and it was, oh, like, my God, because I realized that how quickly we are developing. So whatever level we're at, we are our abilities are increasing, and we are becoming more aware and more awake and more conscious and more everything is heightened, everything is changing. The Earth is being shifted off its axis, and it's affecting us and our DNA and our consciousness and our awareness. And whatever level you're at, that is going to increase. So you may be someone who doesn't believe in UFOs or New Age or conspiracies or dreams or altered states or our real reality or the history or the real history of the earth or the real science or any of this stuff. And those people are going to start to wake up. And that's what's important, because if you take one person and their energy, they have a huge, immense amount of power that they're not aware of. If you multiply them by 1,000, the multiplicity is raises everything. So if you take the power of one and increase it by 1,000, that is, you know, we're here en masse. And by waking up and uniting and coming together and being love, that does have a huge amount of energy and effects.
Andy Thomas, with the advent of the internet now, we can all raise up together, theoretically. And that's perhaps why David Icke has been removed, because we're starting to reach, or he's reaching out to people that would have not otherwise heard of him, especially with the advent of online shows like London Real and things like that. Do you think we're going to go down this control thing where we're going to start seeing shows like London Real? I mean, London Real's been sort of removed or challenged, or it's certainly tinkering now on a very, you know, the guy that runs it is a little bit concerned, and he wasn't really in the conspiracy theories, and now suddenly within a week he's turned 180 degrees into the whole thing. Do you think that the internet might be now more controlled now that they can bring in these measures?
Without any question. If anybody's curious, if you go onto YouTube, it's still there at the moment. There's a talk I gave last year called Censored, and I was anticipating many of the controls that are now coming in, but also looking at, you know, clear policy announcements made by YouTube and social media saying they would feature conspiracy material less, that they would not recommend it so much, and that certain things would be actively removed. And that has now very much come true here right now. So because they've now got basically a weapon to whack us all with, which is that we are now dangerous, you know, whether because people are burning 5G towers or whether because some people don't believe in the virus and therefore might lead people not to take cautions, we now just can be removed because we are no longer acceptable in society. And it's going to, I think, get very bad. If you watch the talk, you'll see where I think this is going to go. And I know it sounds very depressing, but because I think when you start deplatforming people, you're basically saying you do not respect free speech. But then there is going to be pressure put on the platforms that even host websites. How long before somebody goes to whoever's hosting a website and saying, we don't want you to have Alex Jones on anymore. We don't want you to have David Icke on anymore. And if you don't take these down, you will be fined. Because remember, within the last 2 or 3 years, it has been pointed out that if you are like hosting a website, you are the publisher. You are not just the platform. You are responsible for any content that's put out there. And that is how Facebook, for instance, has had so much pressure put on it. And I think we could honestly see the day where whole websites will get taken down. And then that is absolutely the end of a free internet. We're going to be back to pamphleteering, as I've said before. And if you don't get stuff into print and secretly distribute it, you will not get it anywhere. So we could well be going back 400 years here if we do not stand up as one and stop this.
I can see why the pigeons have been taken out of the sky then, because we won't be able to put secret little messages on pigeons anymore if they've been taken out by 5G. Ben, firstly, I believe you wanted to come in with a question, and after that, Carol. So, Ben, first of all.
Yeah, I'd like to just ask Andy a question. Firstly, I agree with what Andy said. There are actually free speech internet sites coming up, which are like blockchain or peer-to-peer systems such as BitChute, etc. But so I believe the internet will split into two. We'll have like a mainstream internet, and there'll be a free speech internet, but that will be like separate. It'll be something separate, it'll be the dark web and stuff like that. But the question I wanted to ask Andy is related to crop circles, because I know Andy is the kind of crop circle connoisseur of this group. I really enjoy his articles in Nexus magazine about the crop circles. This year presents a unique opportunity because the man-made crop circle makers who do produce some of the formations are essentially going to be unable to do so unless they want to try and brave the lockdown and risk being captured and things like that. So what do you think about the possibility that this could be some kind of controlled experiment into the crop circle phenomenon? In other words, with most, or if not all, of the plankers off the scene, it could be a chance to see what is left through this filter, to see what comes out this year as opposed to other years.
Well, I mean, that is assuming that they are off the scene, because, by the time we get to high summer, when we tend to get many crop circles, of course, some of the more draconian restrictions, I think, will have been lifted. And I mean, let's put it this way. Some of these people are out there anyway, on a dark night, driving to certain areas, and nobody seems to see them. So what's going to stop them now? Presumably you won't pick up the virus in a field, depending on whether the people you're working with have also got the virus or not. So I'm not sure. I have heard this idea. I'm not sure it's going to be of that much scientific value. It will depend. I mean, if we're still in full lockdown by, say, mid-July, well, two things. Then it'll be interesting from the crop circle point of view, but on the other hand, the economy will have completely collapsed by then, and all normality will be over forever. And I don't actually think they can keep us in that kind of lockdown for this long, even if the virus is still a problem, which I'm sure it will be. And just to make a wider point, I mean, they are already saying, well, maybe we will remove some restrictions, but you'll all have to wear masks. A guy from the World Health Organization has said he sees a world where you will all routinely wear masks in any public place, even though some people question the use of masks. But anyway, this is what they're now saying. You'll have the apps. You'll have people checking your temperature when you enter a public place. So they will have to allow some movement in society sooner or later anyway. And to me, the notion that we're going to be in this kind of lockdown in 3 months' time is extremely unlikely, because I don't think that the economy could possibly survive it anyway. But yes, I mean, how the crop circles will respond, and indeed maybe ones not made by people, will be very interesting. And yeah, we await with interest.
Definitely. I know Carol wants to say something, but I just want to make a point about the masks. These masks that you see most people wearing, the paper surgical masks, they actually don't work against airborne viruses. They're designed for surgical use, to protect surgical patients from bacteria, which basically comes out of the mouth and nose of the doctors, nurses, and other staff working on them. But
yeah, although of course they're not at the moment saying it's airborne, of course. So the minute it gets airborne, we're in trouble. But yes, to stop you spitting on people or people spitting on you, yeah, I understand that.
It's the end of the punk era. I can feel it coming. Carol, over to you then with your question.
Thanks, Neil. It's not so much a question. It's just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. What I've also noticed is that the birds are behaving strangely and acting strange. Now, I noticed that at the very beginning, where I had an experience where birds are acting strange. I'm not going to go into it because it doesn't really matter, but the birds are behaving strangely. And I have seen reports on Facebook where other people around the world are also reporting that birds are acting strangely. And some of them, I think, in China were falling out of the sky. So I wanted to mention that. And also animals. I do have an image clearly in my mind where I'm seeing animals that are, I'm not sure if they're wild animals or some animals that are in the zoo in captivity, because I'm seeing animals like large animals like lions and tigers and giraffes. I feel kind of drawn to Africa, but what I'm seeing them being very scared and fearful, and because they're scared and fearful, and I see them acting quite aggressive. Now, I think that's to do with the weather and changes, because as the earth shifts, it's going to create the land masses to move. This is a birthing process. So the earth is going to move, which is going to affect the animals, which is going to affect places like Africa. So I've kind of honed in on Africa because I had a dream last year that I wrote down, that I was reading about the other day, because I write down my real dreams. That's where I see things that are to come. And I wrote about Africa. So I do see things like tsunamis and extreme weather that will have a huge effect on Earth, and that's to do with the poles shifting back into place. But I'm not here to put fear into people. That's the last thing I want to do. But I just want to make people aware of stuff that is to come. The internet will go down. There will be power cuts. The weather is going to change. Now, I'm not saying it's going to all happen in a day. It's the weather's been changing for a long time. So, and the north-south poles have been shifting for a while. So the internet will go down. Weather will change. There will be power cuts. So there's so much to it. I couldn't possibly tell you within this, everything that I've been told within the time frame that we have.
It seems to me that the Mayan calendar was out by about 4 years. I think they forgot to take in leap years because, I mean, this certainly seems more pertinent to 2012 than 2012 was. Talking of animals, I saw something to do with a tiger in a zoo in America. Maybe, Stephen, you might have heard of this, about the first case of an animal supposedly diagnosed with coronavirus. I think it was a tiger in a zoo. Did you hear about that, Stephen, at all?
I did vaguely, yeah, but I don't know any, I don't know any details. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it has now been shown that cats do carry it and can indeed suffer from it. Dogs can apparently carry it in their saliva, but they don't seem to exhibit any symptoms. So, there has been a serious proposal that people shouldn't let their cats out at the moment. And certainly if cats started going that could have a very interesting social effect.
Andy, you have a cat, don't you, Andy Chaplin?
Yeah, I think we should be very
careful. Any symptoms from your cat?
No, I think we should be very careful about this because there's a lot of people apparently dumping pets on animal shelters.
That was cats being thrown out the window in China or something, they heard.
Yeah, and some people might start poisoning cats, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be really careful about this kind of thing.
Yeah, we don't endorse people throwing out their cats out the window.
No, clearly not. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge the reality. And if it turns out that there was, proof, absolute, that they are carrying it, they would have to act on it. So no, I totally get your point, Andy. But, if it become a problem, we would have to
That's when it turns into superheroes, doesn't it? Like Catwoman or something.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to talk about movies, I do seem to remember the original Planet of the Apes world started when the cats and dogs all died. And then they started to use apes instead to take over tasks. And then they started to get more intelligent. So be warned.
Yes. Okay.
I just want to bring something in.
Yeah, go on,
going back to Stephen's idea on Trump being mainstream and controlled.
I knew I started something.
Okay, so Bill Gates is calling for basically mass mandatory vaccines. And also, there was this bizarre, I don't know if you guys have seen it, this bizarre Microsoft advert commercial starring this woman called Marina Abramovich, who apparently is a Satanist. And she was doing this spirit cooking thing. And for people who don't know that, Google spirit cooking. It's this weird satanic kind of ritual involving blood and baths and God knows what else. But this was apparently in this Microsoft advert, which was then taken down, but a lot of people observed it. So bearing in mind there's a satanic element to Microsoft, allegedly. Bill Gates wants mandatory vaccines. He's on record for saying that, and Trump is against mandatory vaccines. Surely if Trump was mainstream controlled, he would be absolutely loving the vaccines from Bill.
My observation about Trump is that he plays to his base. And if it's something that doesn't really matter, like abortion, as far as he's concerned, he'll still play to his base so that he keeps his followers. That's my take on it.
But surely he would be singing the praises of Bill Gates's vaccines.
Not necessarily. Not a, he has. I think he has. I don't really know this, but my take on it is that he has a few agendas. One agenda is imposed upon him, by the deep state or whoever's really in control, and the other is his own agenda. His own agenda is to play to his base because that's his own power base. So
but he isn't on record in saying he didn't even want to be president. He feels he had to do it.
Yeah, I know. Well, he says anything. He says anything at all that sounds good, and then he'll contradict it, a week from then and say something else that sounds good. There's no substance to anything he says. That's my take on it. Nothing.
And doesn't
it's just all fluff.
under his hair.
I've got to back Andy
You
up
can't
here.
take anything he says seriously at all. That's the problem. People keep trying to read meaning into what he says, and they've been doing that ever since he became president. There's no meaning.
I'd love to back Andy C up here, but we'd have to do an entire another show because it's such a big subject. We really would. That's the only reason I'm staying out of it, Andy, honestly.
Could we see the days of President Gates?
But I think that'll be a demotion.
I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. I don't trust his philanthropy. I don't buy it. Yeah.
It'd be like John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was once asked, "Why don't you become president?" He said that would be a demotion.
Exactly.
Stephen, what's your view on Joe Biden, out of interest?
Well, I don't know. Here's the thing: a lot of these people are really actual sociopaths. I'm not sure that he's that, but I think that he's corrupted by power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me put it this way. If President Trump was to go up to young teenage girls and start groping them and feeling their shoulders and sniffing their hair, would the media pull Trump up on that? Because that is exactly what Joe Biden's
done worse. Trump apparently has done worse than that.
Apparently, but according to who?
Well, same with Biden. I mean, there's nobody that has any video of it, But apparently,
I'm sorry,
he was doing it to Biden.
There's a lot of photos showing.
There is a lot of video.
Exactly.
Well, but not the thing that he's currently being charged with.
Oh, is it? What's he being charged with?
Currently, the woman is charging him with having actually put his fingers up her vagina.
Okay. Have a
so
look.
That we don't know.
Have a look at some of the footage. What's mind blowing to me is Biden doesn't even hide this fact. So there is footage of him in front of world press where he's literally groping. He's got hold of breasts. He's sniffing hair.
That I haven't seen the breasts.
He's the Jimmy Savile of politics in America, isn't he?
But I'm not defending Biden. I think they both have the same proclivities.
If Trump did this, it would be orange man bad impeachment, but because Biden does it, liberal, he's okay. Apparently that's one quote was, he's just a little bit touchy-feely.
I don't agree. I think that they both can get away with basically anything along that line that they want to, because Trump's been charged with worse, and it's just Teflon. He goes, speaking of Teflon, it bounces right off. Yeah. So I don't want to get into that any further, but I think they're both big trouble.
Okay, I'm going to dump a link because I've got to do this. This has got to be done. I'm going to dump a link, and I want you guys to have a look. And you tell me, if Trump did this, what would the press do?
I thought we were talking about the coronavirus.
We are, but this is to do with the Satanism. My point is, I think that there is a hell of a lot.
Tell the audience what it's about, because obviously they can't see what you're dropping.
Okay,
yes, I don't think we're going to grasp that link in a few seconds.
For those who can't see it, just put in Google Joe Biden groping, and you will find the most disgusting, proper creepy, gropey images of Joe Biden doing this. And the point is that if Trump did this, he would be impeached on this. But because Biden does it, he's just a little bit touchy-feely, just likes people just, a little bit over the mark. I personally believe that the Democrat side is the mainstream. These are the people that would absolutely ram through vaccines. They would absolutely take more freedom of speech, more because the thing is, with Boris and with Trump, they were actually reluctant to impose full lockdowns. Boris didn't really want to do it. Trump doesn't really want to do it. But if the Satanists get in, they would extend it for 18 months easily, because there's already been talk about this 18-month period. And I think that's a very, very dangerous precedent. We're going into like full-on police state territory here.
Couldn't we say, though, that New Zealand actually imposed lockdown, and the last I heard they only had about 4 or 5 cases, so they could sort of shout, yeah, well, it's worked for us, and we jumped on the whole thing straight away?
New Zealand is an island, and they, from what I can understand, don't have many people, or didn't have many people infected going in there. I could be wrong. I think New Zealand is lucky. We'll see if it holds.
If you look at the graphs, I mean, what's interesting, if you just look at Europe, we are one of the slowest countries here in Britain to respond, and they are now estimating we may well wind up with the most deaths. if the current trajectory is not altered very shortly. So that might well say something. And all I can say for Boris is I'm sure he's very, very glad there isn't an election coming up anytime soon.
It makes you wonder why he got the election out in December. He kind of had a hint that something was coming up.
Well, I'm glad Brexit happened when it did. But, you know, the actual looking at these graphs, it's like the infection rates are like a parabolic arc. And judging by what I see, it looks as if many countries are now at the peak of that graph, and that includes Britain, which means that if this continues, if the projection continues, we should see a decline in infection rates pretty soon. In which case, what will happen then? I mean, how low do they have to get before the lockdown's lifted? Well, there's no, you know, the chief medical officer has been sort of like saying this, that, and the other, but they're not actually, this is an unprecedented situation. They don't have any contingency for this sort of thing. So it's completely open. I mean, technically, the lockdown, with all the Orwellian controls that it has, could last indefinitely. It's completely dependent on what happens, the outcome of, and at the moment, no one knows exactly what the outcome is that would be a condition by which the lockdown will be lifted. So it's a very dangerous situation. There's no sunset clause on anything that we're enduring at the moment. Absolutely none.
Do you think, Ben, that this whole thing about I think that Andy Thomas was talking about this move that masks should be worn everywhere, do you think this could be to kind of normalize this thinking that wherever we go there's a virus, so it's an ongoing thing to normalize wearing the masks everywhere?
This could represent a permanent change in culture, especially if this coronavirus it eventually evolves into new strains, so it becomes basically like influenza. In other words, it's a permanent part of the viral landscape of the planet Earth, which means that every winter there'll be coronavirus outbreaks. And even if there's not, there's probably someone's going to suggest we do this with flu and things like that. I mean, we know that how, you know, cultural ideas can emerge out of a single event which then stick. For example, fireworks at New Year were never a big thing in Britain until the year 2000, when they were everywhere. Yeah. And since then, we've had massive fireworks display every New Year. It just took that one instant to bring that entire cultural mindset into the entire country.
Along with this weird clapping thing on Thursday. Thursday, 8 o'clock. Now, the thing is, I've got to clarify that I think the NHS do a fantastic job, and there are some absolutely angel doctors and nurses out there. So I will say that. But this whole kind of like this clapping thing at 8 o'clock on a Thursday, it's just a little bit North Korean kind of Kim Jong-un parade for me.
Well, as ex-NHS myself, after 23 years in the service, I'm biased, and I admit that, and especially having just lost 2 brother porters as a result of this, I am biased. So I do appreciate what people do, but if there is something sinister coming out of this, I'll be, if I really do sense something sinister is emerging out of this practice, I'll be the first to say it.
I think
the drawing of the rainbows and stuff like that.
For me, it's not the appreciation thing. I totally get that. It's more the kind of like, well, I'm clapping hardest, so I appreciate them more kind of thing. Or why isn't my neighbour clapping it? You know,
the same as Joseph Stalin was like this, right? Joseph Stalin, people would clap Stalin, and he'd go on for hours until people's hands were sore because no one wanted to be the first one to stop clapping.
Yeah, you know? There is a familiarity between. To me, there's a familiarity between, or similarity between, the Nazi regime and what's happening now. There's a similar feeling to it.
It's early days of it.
It's this feeling of you should be going along with what the authorities are saying, and if you don't, then you're a crackpot, or you should be locked up or banned or censored.
We're going to get some other little red books dropping through our letterbox, as well as ones that say be careful of coronavirus. There'll be ones saying don't catch conspiracy theory virus or something like that. You know,
we've seen this in the media. But you know what? This mindset is coming about, especially like there'll be people who will be looking at other people around them and saying, well, like, how are you self-isolating? Are you things like that? This snitch on your neighbour stuff. All authoritarian regimes do this. They use crises as excuses. The Nazis did this. The US did this after 9/11. Whether these crises are created or whether it's just an opportunistic thing, they will take advantage of it. They will use it, and they will use it as an excuse to do what they want, and it gets round a propaganda obstacle they otherwise wouldn't have to cross.
Now, Sylvia Browne, as we mentioned in our last show, was the mystical psychic that a few years ago wrote in a book that she predicted allegedly predicted the beginning of this coronavirus and said that it would go away, but come back in about 10 years' time in 2030 and then never be heard of again. Carol, with the Pleiadians, did they predict this to you?
Well, that's such a big question, because I've been so targeted, and I've had so many experiences with the MILAPs and the black military ops and the negative agenda, actually over the last couple of years, that I was in a relationship with someone who was part of that. And he left and then they took him out. They just took him away. His mission was completed. And so he left in June, but I was so distracted that no, I didn't see it coming. The last couple of years has been kind of horrendous for me, where I've been infiltrated and targeted by the negative military operations, and just bribed and had all kinds of stuff going on, and been followed and had my phone tapped and laptop and all kinds of stuff going on. That I was totally distracted and wasn't connecting to the Pleiadians in the way I had been, which I am now. And he was part of that. He was part of that negative agenda to stop me from being on my path. Because if I had seen this coming, I wrote my first book. I channeled my first book started to channel my first book in 2009. So if I'd seen this coming, I would have let people know about it, and that was part of his mission, was to distract me. And that's what's happening on a huge scale now. Now, I've also had experiences where I've been shown Mars, and that was a couple of months ago, and I was on Mars, and I was being shown that they are building on Mars rapidly. They've been doing it for a while, but they've increased their building on Mars, where they're using bulldozers and things are happening really quickly. And there's a reason for that. So I think we need to have a look at the stuff that's going on off-world, and the things that are that people are, the whistleblowers are coming out and saying stuff is going on and happening. And then so I had an experience with anyway, I'm not going to go into that stuff because some of it's really dark. So what was your question, Neil? Sorry.
Don't worry, it's okay. But it's interesting you mentioned Mars, though, because Ben, you have an interest in Mars and secret space programs and things like that. Do you think there's anything happening on Mars then to do with this? Is it connected?
Yes, I'm very interested in the issue of the secret space program. The idea, I do believe that people have reached Mars and many other places beyond, although we don't hear about it because of what I know about the development of free energy and anti-gravity spacecraft and things like that. Some of this is created by human inventors. Others, the technology has been retrieved from salvaging the wreckage of crash flying saucers, which ET created. Now, I don't know of any connection between COVID-19 and Mars that I'm aware of. I know that I do believe that I do take what Carol said seriously about the creation of bases. I believe there have been bases. There was someone called Stephanie Ralph who wrote a very intriguing story that was backed up by several other people about Mars.
But I think there is a connection. I think that a lot of the CEOs that are stepping down, and some of the people who have, I don't want to say names, but people who have meant to have died in jail or committed suicide in jail. I think a lot of I think some people in our histories also, as well as people today who've done horrendous things, are taken off world, are taken into different, like Mars or wherever it be in the universe, and are actually still alive.
Wouldn't it be easy though? I mean, it seems quite an expensive procedure to take someone off the planet to send them all the way to Mars to silence them. I mean, in the past you've had assassins and people have changed identity, or they've moved them to another country or something like that, or made them forget who they are. Taking them to Mars seems an extreme measure, especially the fact that Mars, as I understand it, doesn't really have oxygen that we can breathe because it hasn't been terraformed. Or are we to believe then that Mars is actually very different from what we're officially told? Is it a terraformed planet, for instance?
I can comment on that. I don't know specifically about that because, of course, expeditions to Mars, it doesn't just involve. The thing about Mars, it doesn't just involve craft from NASA and the Russians and things like that. It involves amateur astronomers on Earth who have been examining the planet. Now, for example, the atmosphere of Mars can be seen from Earth using a telescope. You see, astronomy is the one truly democratic science. I don't believe there can be cover-ups in astronomy. There are just too many observatories. There's too many amateur astronomers. It's one of the most popular hobbies in the world.
But sorry to intervene there, Ben. But then there are 13. There's 13 star signs. So there's not 12 as we've been told.
It's Ophiuchus, isn't it? Is the 13th zodiac?
I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. I mean, I know what you mean, but that is true. That's a controversy within astrology I'm aware of. But as far as Mars goes, I mean, the reason something might be done on Mars would be certain people might want to get off the planet if the Illuminati are planning some kind of disaster to try and it's a kind of double or quits maneuver to try and create the New World Order. And
but that's what they're doing right now.
It doesn't necessarily mean they'll succeed, but it's what they might try to do. I don't want to be too grim and gloomy about it because, as I said earlier, there's lots of things going against. A lot of things are not going their way right now. But it could be some kind of. I mean, we talked about the fake alien invasion, things like that. Some kind of natural disaster. Who knows? I mean, we know they can engineer weather.
I've got a question for Carol, actually. Carol, the absolute end game. Let's imagine if the dark side absolutely had their way. What do you think the end game would be? I believe it would be something along the lines of wiping out humanity completely or keeping them as slaves, and then at some point the dark aliens turning up and basically ruling over as masters. What's your take on that?
Well, as I was saying earlier, what I was shown is that there's two waves of energy hitting the Earth at the moment. One is positive and one is negative. And that's very much to do with ET energy, with Star Nation energy. So I always call the positive Star Nations and I call the negative ET energies. But there is absolutely two streams of energy hitting the Earth at the moment, like beams of light coming down. And the Earth is going to twist and divide, and it's one. So the one is going to become two. One is going to stay where it is or drop to a more negative, and one is going to ascend or go into a higher dimension or a higher state or a higher awareness or a higher consciousness. Wherever it goes, it's going to be on a higher level. So the negative is going to either stay where it is or drop. That's going to include people who are extremely negative, have done horrendous things. People who energy is vibration, and you cannot have oil and water don't mix. They don't mix. So you can't have. They're not going to hold the negative energy is not going to be able to jump onto the positive energy when the Earth twists and divides. So it's just not going to be able to, because they don't mix. So it is going to be a divide between realities, a divide of the Earth and the Earth's energy and us, because we're not going to be able to coexist anymore with the negative and the positive is not going to be able to coexist. I do believe on the highest. Are you saying
the negative are unlikely to be able to win this war when you look at the window sort of thing?
Yeah, I do, because even if they do appear to be, They have absolutely no control over what's going to happen when the Earth twists and pulls apart and becomes two. They've got no control over that. That's beyond their capabilities of having any control over that at all.
Could we be clear when you say the Earth twists and pull apart and becomes two? Are we talking physical planet breaking into, or are we talking a spiritual twisting of two consciousnesses, if you like?
I think it's more of a non-physical. I don't think it's a physical thing. I don't think it's a physical thing.
So some people, if I get this correctly, some people will be more New Agey, love and light, for want of a better description, and other people will be much more kind of average Joes or something. But I mean, haven't we got that anyway?
Well, this is where the divide comes in, because the love and light or New Age or conspiracy, or people who are awake and aware and conscious and aware of what our real reality and what's going on, are going to be evolving and going into a higher dimension. And then those who are negative and reptilian energy and fear-based, and people like the royal family and the lower frequencies, the reptilian energies, the lower ET energies, the lower people like Hitler, are going to be either staying on the same level or devolving. But so there's it just came to me there that it's very interesting that the members of the royal family that recently left just before this came out, the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a direct link there. I think they well knew what was going to happen, what was going to come, and they wanted out.
They're in America now, is that right?
Yeah, they haven't fled to the
Canada.
safest place then, have they?
No,
Yeah,
I was going to say.
they're currently in Los Angeles, I do believe.
Yeah, that's probably a hotbed of activity, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
Yes.
but isn't it interesting that they left just before this all kicked off? I think that's too much of a coincidence. I think that the royal family are reptilian. I think he became aware of stuff that was going on that he may not have had knowledge of before. So I think he was shown things, and with him being a father or becoming a father, I think his bloodline is different.
Maybe a Hewitt.
Harry is the son of James Hewitt, I believe, who was Diana's riding instructor in whatever you have to. But we know that she was having a relationship with him. We know she had a loveless marriage to Charles. Charles and Diana both said that the wedding was their worst day of their lives, because Charles was in love with Camilla, Diana was in love with him, and she'd had a relationship with him. And Harry, by the look of him, comparing him to pictures of Hewitt, I think it's like father, like son.
How do they take to the royals in America, Stephen, now dwelling out there?
There's not really that much interest one way or another. I just, I mean, you guys don't really exist. America's the only thing that exists. We're very ethnocentric and absorbed in ourselves. So other things out there.
We thought they loved the royals. We thought they were in love with Windsor Castle, the Queen. I mean, did David Icke put a stop to all that with his reptilian agenda kind of stuff?
I'm just not aware of a whole lot of. I mean, but I'm not really tuned into the popular culture anyway. So it may be that the people that are totally tuned into the popular culture do have that, but I never. I never have.
You just don't buy your weekly magazines, do you?
No, I never have. I'm oblivious to that stuff. It just
one thing is for sure. I'm sure Prince Andrew is very happy that the virus is taking away all the headlines now.
Of course, he's less busy these days with bookings, isn't he?
Sigh of relief, and it gets him off the front page.
But maybe he created it. There's a new theory.
Yeah.
Andy Thomas, what if you were to put your crystal ball in front of you? What would you predict is coming up for us in terms of where this virus shenanigan is going and where world politics is going?
Well, I think we've covered some of this already. I think the next few months and probably the next few years are going to be very difficult. And just looking at it from a social point of view, there will be many disadvantaged people at the other end of this. There's going to be a lot of poverty. We've already got over here now a lot of families using food banks that have never used them before. And indeed, now they're running out of food for the food banks because a lot of other people don't have the money to keep donating to them. I also think we're going to wind up as we did in the austerity years here, with a lot of social care, and I don't just mean care homes, but care for mental health people, social support groups, those networks will not be there because we will not have the money to have them there. And so we're going to see, I think, a lot of people suffering in the next few years. What is rather depressing is that the people at the top will remain on the top, and they will have a lot more power because, once you start disadvantaging people and, they think at the moment we're going to see a huge surge in unemployment, and that will be true in America too, I'm sure, Stephen. We will see a world which is going to be literally turned upside down. And if some of the predictions of what might happen in India come true, for instance, and indeed Bangladesh, there's going to be such deprivation that we will also probably see more people trying to leave those countries. Then you've got a new migrant crisis. I think the next 10 years are going to be extremely difficult. And on top of that, you will have the vaccinations, you will have the control, the surveillance, and of course, the more things get disrupted, the more they will be able to justify bringing them in. So that all sounds very negative. On the plus side, I think there will be more community. Communities will need to come together to see themselves through this, especially if there isn't that social support network. I think people will look again at what matters in their lives and how they live their lives. I think there will be less travel. I think that will be good and bad, maybe good for the environment, bad from the point of view of, once again, the elite will continue traveling. But, we will have many, I think, unknown changes coming up that maybe will reflect some of what Carol is saying here. There will be a new consciousness coming in.
I do agree with you, yeah.
But it arrives, and you will find that there is a light side, but the dark will really try to get its teeth in. And we all need to navigate our way through this and, decide who we are aligned with.
It would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, I think there's some countries that have mandated this already, but there have been countries that have told supermarkets that any food that is still edible but just beyond kind of like its best before date must be given to food banks and homeless charities. I think we need to do that. We need to say to supermarkets, you will not throw out any food that is still edible. It must be given to food banks. And I would encourage people, anyone listening to this, to start getting your politicians, because we throw away a hell of a lot of food. And
enormous amounts of milk have been thrown away recently because the whole market for milk's dropped through the floor. The restaurants aren't there. Even beer is now being thrown away.
Can I just intervene then? I'm sorry, love. Can I just intervene then? Because there's only a few minutes left to the show. I have been shown that food will run short and be in high demand and low supply. So we need to, the supermarkets are going to run short at some point, and it's absolutely crucial that we start growing our own food and going back to basics. It's absolutely crucial. And maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm okay to be wrong. That's fine. But if I'm not, we're going to be screwed. We're going to be stuck without food. So it's essential that we start growing our own food now, whether it's in a large field or a large bit of land, or if it's in pot plants. We have to start growing our own food. We have to start giving our power away to systems like supermarkets and pharmaceutical companies and the government and politicians and lawyers and doctors and the school systems. We need to start taking our power back and stop waiting for other people or something outside of ourselves to take action. But
there could be problems. There could be problems with food. Because the other problem we've got, which is already an issue, is that some of the vegetables that are coming up and being grown, we don't have the people to pick them. The people who can't come over from Europe, who often do it here. And although you could say, let's all get out there and pick it, what the farmers are saying is we need skilled workers. We haven't got the time to be risking people around machinery and just everybody flooding onto the land. And they are talking about ploughing stuff back in. Now, that could mean in a few months' time, let me finish one moment, Carol, what we're going to see is Carol, can I just finish my point, please? Because what you're going to see, I'm afraid, is you will get food shortages where the harvests just stop coming in. And that's when I think, we're all kind of coasting at the moment. There seems to be enough food. I think that's when you will see certain kinds of food start to vanish. And I do worry that might create yet another new panic. Now, that'll be regulated because the shops are now being run very differently. But of course, that will invite more controls, which we will certainly see more of. And some maybe even might be necessary.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, go for it, Carol. Final words to Carol quickly.
Thanks. So I agree with what you're saying. They can't find the people to go and pick the produce and the vegetables. If we get to a point, which I hope we don't, but I see that we do, where the supermarkets are going to run out, there's going to be people to pick those vegetables, lining up.
No, I've just given a reason, unfortunately, why that won't work, because they need skilled workers and they haven't got the time to train them at the moment in time to get what's growing now. That's what
I'm saying is that
I think that will happen.
What I'm saying
at the
is,
moment, there is an immediate.
What I'm saying is that if that does happen, people are going to become hungry and starving to the point they're not going to care if the workers are skilled or not because the food is there.
It's going to be a peasant revolt, you mean, type of thing.
Yeah,
kind of, Neil, yeah.
Anyway.
We might even have to go back to the Blitz where, parks and people were told to grow allotments and grow things from home. I think I can see that happening at some point, which I think will be a good thing because it will be away from chemicals and pesticides and that kind of thing and more towards, organic home growing.
Food security is going to be a massive issue. And the fact that we in Britain have just discovered that actually we're relying on the rest of the world for around 50% of our food, that's going to have to be looked at because now we know in a crisis we are vulnerable and other countries will find the same thing.
Right, I'm afraid we better draw a line under it now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very, very much indeed for giving up your time and evening to the Paranormal Peep Show Coronavirus Special. Number 2, that is. So thank you, Carol Noonan. Thank you, Stephen Sakellarios. Thank you, Ben Emlyn-Jones. And thank you, Andy Thomas. And, of course, thank you, co-host to Andy Chaplin. And I'm Neil Geddes-Ward. So join us next month on the Paranormal Peep Show. Hopefully we'll have some more down-to-earth stuff, talking about ghosts, spirits, and aliens and all sorts of weird stuff. So take care, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you. Good night.
See you later.
Good night. See you. Thanks.
And we're clear.
Yeah, that was
All right.
We can relax now. Okay. Thank you.